Today we are covering section 5.2, which is the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is something that we can use to solve any quadratic equation. Sometimes factoring works, there are other methods, but the quadratic formula works every single time, so that's why it's useful. Quadratic formula should be reviewed from Algebra 2, but just in case, is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Once again, we use this to solve a quadratic equation that has an x squared and an x in the same problem. We want to use this because we can't just take the square root because we have this x in the problem as well. So we need to either factor or use the quadratic formula. This section is focusing on the quadratic formula. A is the number that's in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, and c is our constant. All three of those numbers include the symbol that's in front of them. So this would be a positive C, a positive B, and a positive A. But if any of those were minus, we need to include that with it. A few things to point out before we get into the examples. If you are taking the negative of a B that's already negative, that becomes positive. And anytime you square a number, it becomes positive. So this first number inside the square root should always be positive. At the end of our problem, when we're simplifying, we will split this up into two separate problems. One will be the plus and one will be the minus, but it just saves us a little bit of writing to write that as plus and minus to start with. Some of these problems, as you work through, will work out nicely. Like in this case, the square root of 9 becomes 3, and then we can split this up into our two problems, negative 5 plus 3 over the 2, negative 5 minus 3 over the 2. And that will give you two separate answers. Sometimes the radical will not come out evenly, and if the directions are to leave it as an exact answer, you want to just leave it as that square root. You don't have to split that up into two separate problems. If they want a decimal approximation, you could then type in 5 plus the square root of 33 divided by 4, get the first one. 5 minus the square root of 33 divide by 4, that'll give you your second answer. I believe IXL is going to ask you to leave it exact, so this will be your final answer. Looking at two more examples. In this first one, we have an x squared and an x in the same problem. That's my clue that I'm going to need to use this quadratic formula. So to set it up, I want to take the negative of b, which is negative 2, plus or minus square root b squared, which is 4, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 15. And then that's all over 2 times a, which is just 2. Simplifying, I always try to simplify inside the radical first. So I still have negative 2 plus or minus. Inside the radical, I have 4 minus, and then 4 times 1 times negative 15 gives me a negative 60. Still over 2. Inside that radical, would then give me 4 plus 60, which is 64. That is a square root that comes out evenly, so at this point I would split this into two problems. I would take negative 2 plus 8 over 2, which gives me negative 6, positive 6 over 2, which gives me 3. Switching this to the minus version gives me a negative 10 on top. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. My two answers for this problem are 3 and negative 5. You should always be able to go back, plug in those answers, and make sure that when you plug it in, does give you 0. In our second example, following the same formula, you take negative b plus or minus square root of b squared, 81, minus 4 times a times c. Notice in this we do have an a. A lot of times you get into the habit of not having any number here, so you just assume that's always 1, but we do have a is 2 there, so make sure you plug that in. Same thing on the bottom, it's 2 times a on the bottom, not just 2, so 2 times a would give me 4. Cleaning up the inside, would give me 81 minus 40. 81 minus 40 is 41. Since the square root of 41 does not simplify and doesn't break down any further, that is our final answer for this one. On IXL, they may ask you to type this as two separate ones. So just type in negative 9 plus the square root of 41 over 4, negative 9 minus the square root of 41 over 4. Hope these examples help. If you still have questions as you work, please ask questions. Please feel free to email me or create a Flipgrid. Ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope to see you soon.